How
much time do we give people?
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Thanks for coming over. Kiteboard or wing or God knows what, multi-hulls or dinghies or 14 or the boats I'm building or whatever. So I definitely understand like what it is. One of my best Mike Holt, Trevor Bates, they're almost kind of like heroes of mine on the Around the County a few years back on Niagara Foot Steel. And we just missed out on the course record because we got stuck in a hole at the finish where we were going down the side of San Juan Island. And you know, Trevor Bates has the Triple Crown. He's won the 5 World in the 18-foot skip. Gigi Gitman or something, and I was like, oh my God, you know, Trevor Bates. I looked at him, he looked pretty scared, so then I thought. Five world champion. So, do I skip low or high? And Trevor was like, I don't know. I get this one down. Thanks for coming. I thought maybe I'd just start out. Just a quick note about me, maybe super fast, and then give you just a quick run around the shop so you can kind of see the process of like what happens in here. Maybe that's interesting, maybe not. And then we kind of asked like, hey, maybe can you show us like kind of how you do your own pattern? So I pulled this chunk of swim set, and once in a while at the boat show, I kind of do the same spiel. So if you've seen that before, I apologize, but I didn't really have any time to prepare, so I thought I'd just do the same shtick kind of. But anyway, I'm Dan Kaseler, and my background is really in sailmaking. And at some point in the back corner of my sail loft, sort of, I came from the windsurf business actually, and had a pretty cool career doing that. But when my wife and I decided to move back to the Pacific Northwest, it felt like a lot of high-end windsurfing going on. So I started to need to reinvent myself, and that brought me to kind of big. So I did a lot of sailboat racing, a lot of windsurfing, kiteboarding around the world. And where the materials I use and the approach I had in the Raptor Deck really just come right out of that. Very first Raptor Decks were actually built at the Cobra factory in Thailand, which is the factory that I worked with a bunch to make stomp pads for. Originally windsurf boards and SUP boards were kind of coming on. Stomp pads on surfboards where I went to the factory and it's like, hey man, what we're gonna do is like just a stomp pad, but I need it like the size of a Melges 24. So it was pretty funny because those guys were like, what are you talking about? And first years we built the stuff overseas in Asia, and they're really cool. I worked over there for so you never get the quality where you never deal with delivery because someone ordered a Raptor Deck and then like building it overseas months before I get it here. There's all this cost. Anyway, we work in a few different ways, which you guys probably know. Seeing us around, and some guys just come and buy a sheet of foam. That's cool. We send them home. They cut it up with their powder or their really nice strain exposure, whatever. That's cool. It's kind of hard to do anything fancy like that because the knife kind of pushes the foam around. I don't know if you've ever cut foam. It's hard to get like the real bits cut. If you do that, the way to do it is probably to make yourself a jig out of like MDF. A lot of you know, if you're multi-wheel setters, you're probably fixing your boats all the time. So it's like a router with flush trim bit and an MDF pattern works pretty awesome for cutting like a Raptor Deck shape out. You just want, if you're really into your boat. If you
an issue with if you just straight cut it with that thickness causing the product to pop off?
I mean, if it actually works pretty okay, you know, a lot of our competitors will just have, there's some of our competitors that just have like a crisp edge. So part of having that bevel on the edge is just cosmetic. Part of it is a little less of a tripping hazard. And part of it is if you're sticking out like a rolled edge, the foam has the good foams. This is polyethylene EVA mix. It's really high-end foam. That's why it's so expensive for us and for you. But they have a lot of memory. So if you stick your fingernail into them and then you come back like the next day and be like, oh, that's weird, that happily shape disappeared, or you dent it with the chair leg or something that has really good rebound. But that also means if you stick it on a curve, a few temperature cycles, it really kind of wants to, it may try to want to peel back up off of that from the inherent stress of the material. So it does help a little bit to have that thin edge. This is another reason why we do it. Cosmetics sticks a little better, a little less tripping hazard, but it's by no means critical for, you know, if you just, there's definitely a market and a thing where you can just cut your own panels and it's pretty cool. Yeah, so that's how folks approach this sort of like, I'm just gonna, you know, make myself a pad with my razor blade and blah, blah, blah. And then after that, we have guys that build their own patterns and they just drop them off at the shop. And that's a killer way to work because for us, we don't send a guy out to your boat to pattern it and we don't send a guy back to do the install. So that saves, I don't know, 25 to 30% off the cost for you. And it's kind of great for us too, because I have a staff that runs around and makes patterns. But in a way, it's pretty cool because the pattern shows up by UPS in the mail every day, or somebody walks in the shop and kind of explains what they want. And then we just take those patterns and we turn them into parts. And then the third model is, of course, you call us up and you say, hey, I got this badass trimaran. The guy's just bonked out the Jules Verne and like, but I just bought it. So can you Raptor Deck it? And it's over there at LA Paper, you know, hey, Don, go get it. Those guys pay the most. But then we go down there, we either use like monofilm or we also have a, you know, we work from 3D scans, but it's pain in the ass. So we have a ProDan ProLiner, which is kind of like a magic computer pen on a string. And we can digitize right on the surface of the boat. And it's a real slick way for us to get to panels.
Easier, better than the scanner.
Way better.
Than
And I can talk about that later, but the scanner is challenging because from the computer side, you just get a massive point cloud of points, and it's hard to parse so much heavy files and so much data. Whereas the like ProDan style, you're just getting the points you need. You have a real small file size, and you can work fast and CAD be cleaned up.
Do you have a laser pointer, or how do you?
I'll show you, I can show you that a little bit later, but let's do a quick tour. And then there are, I don't know, I call my pen tennis still back here. Guys can pull out. There was a tire stand around the concrete floor, but just I guess real quickly, let's walk back here. It's not much to see, but I'll show you. So this table right here is pretty cool. And this is sort of one of the ways we get patterns. I don't know, these things, actually these were films that we cut for somebody because they had a boat we've done before. But, like, you know, you're not sure if the hinges are in the same spot, or in this case, it looks like, I know these are swim set parts, so I'm imagining the guy's got some galvanic there that weren't in the stock file. So rather than just, like, cutting the thing and then he has to cut the thing, when he gets, we ship it to Canada or whatever, and he's like, oh man, this doesn't fit. We have the option that we send guys, we'll cut out of the film, like, sort of a pattern of the work we're going to make. Give the guy a chance to kind of mark it up, cut it out, make changes. So I think this is the first time I've ever seen one use like line paper, but whatever. He kind of, you know, I can work. So these are on the digitizer because somewhere around here, hooked up to there. Basically, I would tape this down. I see that sits here. We tape this in place, and we can like draw around it, or we can take a series of points where we need them around the outline, say, right? And that gets it back into the computer. Maybe I just digitize a little bit, and then I can overlay it over the pattern that I custom through the parts for. And that's the same basic way it works when somebody sends us a pattern. Okay, we sent these films out. He added a cutout here or something, a cutout there, so we'll update them. But many times people just bring us a pattern and just start from scratch. So this is one of the ways, or really a great way to do it. Photogrammetry and other ways to get patterns. But here, Raptor Deck, mostly we just throw them on. I have a guy comes to work, takes these down, digitizes them. They go in the folder in the cloud. Then the CAD guys pick those up. They know the job number as they pull up the files. Hopefully, this guy sends photographs. And they look at the photographs. They look at the patterns. They kind of clean them up in what we use as Rhino, but pretty much any CAD software would work. And then we're able to sort of get those outlines to the computer so we can figure out the middle of those parts.
Files. Files on record. So if you
We
want to
do.
replace them.
Yeah, so that's, and I could show you, there's really no secret. So as we built this thing up, I mean, we're still small, but we built like a backend that's pretty neat where we have like all the files living, turns out they're on the Amazon cloud and the S3 bucket or whatever. And every job's got a job number. And in each folder, it's like, we have a job tracking app with that job number. We know if you call us up, we're trying to figure out how to share this with the customer, but if you call me up, I can look you up and I can tell you, oh, I know exactly where the job is in this process of patterning, digitizing, drawing CAD, CNC cutting, shipping, invoicing, like whatever that thing is. We sort of have these steps. So we tell, and then a guy calls us up 4 years later and he's like, oh, you know, I dropped my burning briquettes on there and I burnt a hole in my Raptor Deck. And we're like, what's your name? And then we look him up and we find him by boat type of guy's last name, first name, or whatever. We search the system, up pops the guy. We go look in that same folder. We have photos of this boat from the original pattern, photos of the parts. We have the original CAD file. So we grab the proof, which is like something we send everybody to see. Hey, that's what you're gonna buy? And they go, oh yeah, I need panel 13. We go, okay, cool. We just melt panel number 13 and zip it off. And that's like a really, really underrated and cool thing, not about Raptor Deck, but by this niche, this marine business of making these panels when people are doing it right. We do that a lot, and it's like, it's pretty cool to be able to just like dial up the guy, send him like the same part with his logo or whatever he had originally. So that's a pretty neat deal.
If the part's bigger than this table.
Yeah, so if it's bigger than this table, it's no big deal. We actually just put a couple indexing marks on the pattern, which we also digitize, and we'll like either cut the pattern up or we'll slide it along, and we'll digitize this big, huge pattern, and we can just reassemble it in the computer to put those tiles together, basically. So, of course, we bought these Logitech jumbo pads or whatever, the biggest ones you can buy, and we welded up the frame to put two next to them. But you can actually put 12 of them next to each other. They don't matter. They sort of tile. But at the end of the day, it's like, doesn't really make sense to have a bigger surface. You just slide the pattern along.
So if we're doing our own template, what's the size you would like to have? So,
Oh, it's totally up to you, yeah. But, you know, just roll them up and then get in the car. It's like, sometimes it's more convenient to like have them in smaller chunks. Yeah, but it's
Ideally, it would be the chunk size.
I wouldn't stress it too hard. I mean, you can see some patterns over there in that vertical box. I think those ones are. Like they literally sort of. And of course, if they cut them up, we can reassemble them here if we have some products to index sort of how they fit together.
Just shipping those things to you had to be spending.
Yeah, it's not the smart way to do it.
A box like this is probably.
Yeah, that's smart. But they were paying the shipping. But no, actually, maybe we tape them together. Maybe there's, I'm not sure. I'm not. They're mostly running business now, but sometimes people do them as like the rip of the long film, the polyester film. So that's 1 meter wide or 40 inches wide, and sometimes they'll lay them down like edge to edge or something and tell us that, and then stack them and roll them so they can get the box. But all you guys look at the odds, maybe that's stress you are.
So
Well, not all of
you're
you, but-
the maximum size of the actual Raptor Deck panel, the EVA panel
Right.
is 4x8, and then you just
Exactly. It's not 4x8. It's that size right there, which is definitely smaller than 4x8. They're basically metric buns, and they're pretty close. They're just over 1x2 meters. So you're talking 40 by 80 inches. And that is an important point, just to understand that we typically don't do anything with be like an infinity deck that's just like this massive thing that's like edge butted. It's like a tile with a waterway, tile, which you may have noticed looking around. And there's a couple good reasons for that. One is that these foams over a few years will shrink back ever so slightly. So if you butt join anything, over time you'll get a little crack, and in the Pacific Northwest, water will sit there and green stuff will grow. It's not very awesome. And then the other thing is it makes install super duper hard. You basically have a giant sticker, and if it gets unwieldy and big enough, it gets pretty challenging to index it, stick it on your boat the whole way. And it also makes replacing a panel sort of impossible. So there are boats we've done where customers insisted that we butt stuff up. We'll do it if you pressure us hard enough, but we try to discourage you from going that route. It's the right way. And if you look at non-skid on boats right now, on your all grip techs, whatever, or raised gel coat, dimples, it's often built by panels. So that's something that would be kind of a custom.
Repairability.
We're not great at repairing Raptor Deck. It doesn't really repair. There's no really super sweet way to repair it.
Just put a new tile.
Put a new piece in. That's normally there are some things, but I would say for this discussion, normally the low hanging fruit is like, shoot, I screw up this panel, and I'm like, yes, that's $121, and you're like, that sucks. Okay, give me a new panel. Right? That's sort of the best tactic.
Have you done many Corsair boats so far?
Yeah, I've done some Corsairs for sure. I have to look in the system for like F25Cs and 32s and maybe a 28 somewhere. I'm not totally sure, but
He did net rail covers for my boat. Super comfy.
it seems like they're all a little bit different. So even if we have a pattern, even if it's like a super production boat, it's like that's sort of one of the things we really offer is our ability to say, oh, your boat is almost the same, but you had a gap, something's going on. And rather than saying pretty hard to like solving the having us make a pattern is not a big deal, or making your own pattern is pretty straightforward.
one thing that I put this stuff on the interior of my boat, and I made up the patterns, and then they gave me cut out patterns. You
To
cut
check,
out to
right?
check.
Yeah.
And I actually spray painted them gray and put them, and then you say, oh, it's really apparent if you got an issue.
Yeah,
And that
that's
was
cool.
that was very helpful.
Yeah. So we do charge a little bit. Let me tell you people. We typically charge like that, like sort of like basic like thing that we charge. The film, my actual cost is like $10 a yard for the plastic. So we sort of pass that on plus a tiny bit to the customers when somebody sends us a pattern, they want to have us make films to check it. Then we make those films. We charge them like $125 or something like that. And
Totally worth it.
and then they can check. Otherwise, if you send us a nice pattern, we basically guarantee that we're so good at matching patterns, but it means that your pattern has to be good. Depends on how much guesswork we have to do, right? So my guys are awesome at matching it, but some patterns come in, they're so amazing, they're better than my guys can make. Other patterns come in, I swear to God, I'm just wondering. We have jokes around the office, right? We're like, holy shit, look at this one. Like, what are we supposed to do with this? What are we supposed to read this guy's mind? Like, it's just a giant mess, right? So we kind of see it all, and some of them we have to call the guy back and say, Mr. Smith, can you try again? Or we work really, really hard at the same thing. What happens is, the parts, you give us a nice pattern, you probably don't need films to check, because we're gonna. If you build this pattern that's just kind of, then it's good idea to get the films, because it gives you that extra iteration to say, oh, yeah. So that's kind of what happens there. It's a mess in here. We have a couple of little guys, including me, that draw on the computer a lot of the day. I'm sort of converting those to files. And then once, yeah.
I replace the panel 3 years later, like how much color difference might you see between this piece things?
Yeah, so we were really hard. There is some color shift. I'll just give you a straight answer. We work really hard on that, and we basically test with Cascade in Oregon. They have the UV environmental testing boxes, and so we send samples from us and other guys. And even that we have been with the same factory for a long time, we send samples from batches down there. And we give them like $3 grand, and they bake them, and they stick them in the UV box, and we get a read first of all on how well the foam holds up. And then we've been in business for 13 years, so we have a lot of kits out there in the wild. And I can tell you the grays are so incredibly color stable that I could replace a panel like years and years later, and you can't tell. The mocha and the teak go slightly redder with time, as there's a yellow pigment in there that fades no matter how hard we work on it. And so those change colors, and so that can be a challenge. It's really not a problem with the teak color, but with the mocha color, it can be a challenge to replace a panel because you'll notice a slight difference. Surprisingly, the reds and blue, the red's stable, which took us a long, long time to get nailed, and the blue is totally stable. So it depends a little bit on color. Sandstone, it's my favorite color. It's the one you're leaning on, actually, and what I put on my own boat. It's a warm gray. It works with everything. That one's super duper color stable. We don't see it go on sailboats very often, but a lot of what I see is like, when I'm doing all these power boats, I see like a lot of taupe and tan, sort of warm grays in the upholstery, and so it sort of meshes up with that pretty well. It works with all kinds of different color sets. So yeah, so when you come and you want to do a rep deck, feel free to ask about color stability. That's like an important question. UV stability is off the chart. Like you can make it like hell, and you won't have a problem with stability of the material itself. But the color is still, at some point it's a challenge, as it is with the t-shirt. If you left it outside on the ground for like years, it'd be hard for a red t-shirt to be the exact same red, even in Seattle, right? And then we're selling it profits. It's also a good deal. So anyway, here's some examples of, I guess, random patterns that are sort of in process right now. Great. This has been digitized or whatever, and I think most of those are like, jobs. We have 100 or something jobs at any one given time in the system chugging through, and those are like, we typically don't throw away the patterns until the parts are delivered to the customer, and the customer is like, yeah, this fits, it's awesome, and then we recycle or get rid of the films at that point, so we can always go back and reference them if we have to. Yeah. So then, I guess what you see back here is sort of like that's their like staging area where kits start getting stacked up, because we basically nest a whole bunch of boats together if we're cutting the same color to increase efficiency, and then they have to be resorted out to sort of be like, okay, this is a particular boat or whatever. So not a lot to see, but this big table where we kind of sort things out and get packed. And some random sailmaking stuff, which you can kind of pretend it's not here.
Are the grooves for appearance or things like water?
Well, in there? Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is, we'll get out of here. The nice thing is it doesn't suck water, so it's by no means a sponge or anything like that. So the grooves don't tend to be a big problem for water sitting in them. And it's really, we originally started doing it for appearance. One thing I will say with grooves or pattern, whether you fish scales or lightning bolts or diamonds or grooves or Escher pattern or whatever craziness you want, circuit board, we've got all kinds of crazy stuff, shattered glass, is that you know, if you just put like a plain gray panel down, it looks so good that first week. It looks amazing. It looks like it's like Apple and Audi had a baby, and it's just the most perfect, clean, tight, modern. But if you get one tiny nick in it, it's like your eyeball goes right to that spot. And when there's some lines and busyness, it tends to look better longer, which is a silly thing to say, but some of that distraction of the fake plank lines and whatnot kind of adds some value for how well it looks after like 4 or 5 years, I would say. It hides some of that funny stuff. So anyway, once that stuff's done, we check this out later. But it's kind of the zone where we just cut stuff out. So I ran that right before you guys came in. We're a little late on order. So that's kind of how parts end up coming out. There's a little in here, there's a little knife. See that little razor blade there? So actually, because the lid is already on the back, not really a secret of the industry anymore, but these three router, most of it with like skinny router head. But the last little bit we cut with this computer driven drag knife, and that cuts the deeper and will do a lot better than skinny blade. That's kind of how that works.
All of these are self.
So they say we have a track.
Microfracture, is that gonna cause future damage to the people wrapping up over it?
I mean, it's hard to say, depending on their health. You might be thinking, okay, water and traffic, something like this. The other thing is like, Raptor's only going to stick as well as what it's stuck to. So if the paint's peeling, you can have a Raptor Deck panel fall off and look at the back and it's just covered in paint. You're like, oh, there's no paint on my boat. It's funny. So, all right, let's get out of here. Get it off the chairs.
You want to put it on over, no skin.
We do, yeah. Yeah, we do that all the time. Here, grab some chairs and pull them up there.
Well, I guess I'll park myself front and center, huh?
Yeah. Oh, my chair, where's my chair? If I'm super bored, you guys can. But there was some talk about like, hey, how do you make that? So. Pretty much anything vector. I mean, it doesn't even have to be vector, but we can work from a SketchUp. But like, if you say go to Prism Graphics and talk to Brad Cole, and you're like, "Hey, I got a logo on the bottom of my back of my boats. It's Mako and Brad Cole or Margo or somebody local." Just try to get the logo when you get, when you get the sticker. Try to get the PDF or whatever they have of the logo, and you can hand that to us, and we can just get it into CAD, scale it up, send you some proofs, and we can go back and forth. I mean, we don't have like a dedicated art person. I guess that's me, really. But we're, we know our way around the software. So if you have like something, we could definitely do it, because we do an awful lot of custom logos. And especially like these big racing programs and their sponsors and stuff, they always want like a giant Toyota or some, crazy thing on there. So we're stoked to do that. It's fun for us. We charge, depends, but we charge anywhere between 80 and $200 to add like sort of a normal size book, depending on how tricky it is to tool path it for the router. And if you're thinking about logo, then more binary, or it doesn't have to be black and white, but if there's lots of crazy like thin lines going everywhere, that's hard, because our process is just CNCing off the top color to show you the bottom color, maybe cutting some panels and doing it inlay. And if it's too with bananas, it's not like we're sublimation die printing on there or something. So it has to be a little bit like, a little blocky. Not
So the
super
one in the corner back there probably was.
Oh, the painting up on the wall? Yeah, that's funny. That's a painting by my friend Larry, but that's not. I used to have this windsurf company called Vandal. I started with this whole skateboard art theme, and I found this kid in the Port Angeles skate park, and he did all the artwork and spray, and we sold it. Yeah, that was like, I just still have that. But it says Vandal all over it. Yeah, if you look closely. But yeah, we could do that, but it would be a lot of router time. That's actually, I think that's a canvas. Yeah. I need glasses too. It's totally cool. Okay. Really quick patterning routine. Here's a chunk of swim step I got from somewhere, and I'll kind of show you how we do it with film. That sounds good. So the trick is, like, right here, I just go super fast, and I worry about. I'd say the thing that people do wrong with patterning is they try to be too careful at first. So what I do is I like to hold the Mylar to the boat with a little bit of double-sided tape, because it's easy on the table here, but when you're crawling around on it, it's hard to move all over on it. So I'm literally just oh, that's about right. And I'll kind of just really, really quickly, I might go like that. And I'll see a scratch mark on the film. I could see a little scrape from my scissors, but you could do that any way you want it. Scissors, no. Well, let's say you can just quickly, super fast. You're not being careful here. Kind of making sure that it's very flat. That part's pretty obvious, but then we have some features. We got some screw heads over here. I didn't quite get far in, so just go ahead and make this thing a bit bigger. That on there. Be like, okay, cool. You're just crawling around your boat. So I do that first. I just cover up the deck area super fast, and if I'm short, I just cobble pieces together. Just and I get the whole area kind of covered up. And then it's kind of not good where we have this 3D where, for example, those screws are poking up. And so with a regular razor or X-Acto knife, I get those And I don't worry about cutting them real nice. I just get it to the point where the film can lay flat on there. Let's say. Because for features, for every feature, we go too big and then we're going to build. The idea is to build back, just like, you know, your carpenters out there. Cut it too big and then build back. Don't try to cut right to the thing. Right, so now the film's flat, so we're not trapping. Hopefully we're not trapping any extra disc, plank shape, whatever in the film. It's really important that it's flat because the Raptor Deck's flat and the digitizer's flat. So you have to make sure it can handle a curve in one direction or a curve in the other direction, like a piece of sheet metal, but it can't handle a compound curvature, right? This is probably flat enough. You could go right over the top, but just for best practice, and just smoke that out of there. You could probably get away with that and let it be there, but I'm gonna just show you the right way. You don't cheat on me. A good pattern. But you can see I'm being this really ghetto. I'm just like hacking it together. This is sort of just like when you're building your trimaran. You can't at the early steps, you can't waste too much time. So a good way to pattern for circles, now that I cut them too big, well, let's say this plate is some kind of bracket or something. I would probably, in this case, you could use anything, but I would probably I like to use the masking tape. And we actually, when we sell a little pattern kit, we'll include a little masking tape. And I'll just use that to build back. Of course, you could build back with some more film, but you're just really trying to copy. So now you have this flat thing and you really have the edge there. It's really obvious for that. For circles, it's a little less obvious. Any 3 points make a plane. Everyone can work that out from high school. But also 3 points by necessity to define a circle. If you have 3 points, the circle will pass through those three. Only one circle will fit through those 3 points. And so really, I could place this in the computer. If you give me 3 spots on the edge, only 3, a 3-point circle, we use it all day long at Raptor Deck. But it's good to have a little more resolution than that. So our trick with like circles and irregular shapes that are kind of like circles is we'll kind of go around them and we'll make sure the tape or whatever you're using is kind of touching the edge of the circle at least at some point. That might be a little bit of overkill there. I feel like I'm on a cooking show.
Minimum more is
Is the absolute minimum, but of course, more is better because if there's any chaos at the digitizing or with your pattern, that just sort of increases my resolution of what I'm able to deliver. But here's the trick. Right here, I'm going to draw a line right where the tape hits the edge of that circle because that tells Raptor Deck guy that he's going to digitize right at that intersection, right there, right there, right there. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points on the digitizer. It'll be right where that tape kisses the edge of the circle. Intersect of that is on that circle for real. So that's the best way, hands down. But it requires you to draw the lines for us where it's a circle. We kind of described that, but that's a really good way to do it. And then you're probably thinking, well, you know, you could send us pattern like this and take a photo of it while it's on the boat. That's always handy. But it's pretty nice if you also tell us like, oh, I want this to be off. Like we do everything metric, but if you're doing freedom units, you could be like, I'll set a 1/2 inch. I'll try to be in America. Say 12 right now, but whatever. And then over here, maybe you're like, I don't care. Maybe you mix units. You're like, offset 9 mm. That's fine too. And that's like, you know, what we kind of do when I'm doing it is I'll kind of look at the waterways that are on the rest of the boat. And if they're like big, I'll sort of follow in that family because I'm always trying to make the pads like here at Raptor, we really want to make the stuff looks like it belongs on your boat. Not like it was this aftermarket thing, stupid thing you just stuck on. Like if you have plank width somewhere else because you have some teak on your boat, we'll match the plank widths. And if you have a certain style of the way the planks are laid out, we'll kind of try to emulate that. We try to do what makes sense. So typically like a 1/2 inch is like a really safe reveal. And then, but sometimes that looks dumb on a really small thing. So we'll kind of like be down to 6 mm or a 1/4 inch on like a small detail. So on this one, I did like 3/8 or 9 mm. This one I did a 1/2. Yeah, exactly. So if you just like, if you guys have it and you draw an arrow right offset and take a photo and consult us, that's fabulous. If you don't draw an arrow or right offset, then you're just going to get a Raptor Deck that's right on the edge of your pattern because that's what you're telling us. And then you're going to go to stick it and you're not going to have any reveal. And if your pattern's not dead nuts on, you can have an issue. And also it's just a better practice down off. So there's a few more features here. I would still handle these guys, these screw heads. I would handle, I'm not going to do them all, but you can kind of get the idea. I'm going to try to do the same routine, where in this case, I'm just drawing, maybe I'll draw, it's a really lopsided box. It's not nice, but again, I'll tell my guy, okay, right there, it's hitting. Oops, right there, it's hitting. And maybe right there, it's hitting. And that's enough that when I come back and digitize that, I'll be cool. It's got really like right up front. Yeah, exactly. So here I'm like, the arrow kind of means offset, or it's great to write off or offset. We have some stuff we recommend. One of those things is drawing an arrow pointing at the bow. I usually use a bit other guys, bigger marker for that so we can really see it. And that's just so when we're laying the plank lines on all these kidney-shaped panels that show up in the mail or through the front door, we don't end up with some that are sideways to the grain of the foam, and some are in line, or sideways to the boat, sorry. So if you draw an arrow pointing to the bow, we got all these weird kidney shapes and rectangles. At a minimum, we can aim them all so they're pointing at the bow when we go to start like trying to turn this thing into. Of course, you can write swim step on there. You can write port. You could write all kinds of stuff on there. It's really helpful for us. You can write your name, like, oh, I'm Dan Kaseler. You can write your phone number, address, all that kind of stuff. Just write right on the pattern. Because when they show up at the shop, the risk is we have patterns like this is the slowest time of year for us. But when we hit the boat show, we'll have patterns like everywhere, and it's hard for us to not get them. We work really hard not to mix them up. Well, the sheets we have a texture that we brush onto the surface, and that's always down the length of the sheet. Sometimes we run the planks 90 degrees to that, but typically we run them down the length. Yeah. We do. We've shied away. The other possibility you see out there is like sometimes there's other people. We used to do waffle girl stuff. It just fell completely out of fashion. The micro dot stuff's pretty slippery with the dots. Yeah. So we thought about it, but that's just you could shove the sheet under an embossing wheel and do that, but we're not with Raptor. We're not currently selling that. I'm not saying we won't ever sell it, but at the moment, like most people want the brushed. It works so well, so we've shied away a little. They wear off and they're a little slippery, so. I mean, they're pretty cool, and but we also kind of are cognizant that we're Raptor Deck, and we're not talking people if that's their thing. We thought about maybe doing a different embossed pattern, and we worked on one for that, but we didn't bring it up public. Okay, so for bigger shapes, you can use a few different techniques, like the perimeter of this thing. If it's a long, smooth curve, again, like everybody does it different, but I actually love using tape, which is a little wasteful, but like if it was me making this pattern, I would just kind of like I'm like pretty good at it after all this time. I'll lay like a nice smooth curve down for the edge. For the edge. Another technique is you can basically just draw it. Like you could come along here and you could like, you could draw this edge, but it's pretty hard to draw it without it being pretty weak. That's where the tape comes in kind of handy. I can and I do, but I have to, it's harder than it looks like because sometimes we get something and it's just a little like this. And we're not very sure in Raptor Deck land whether the boat has this like S curve or whether the guy is a little shaky. So it's hard for us to, especially something that is almost straight. If it's almost straight, but it's not quite straight, that's a challenge. So sometimes I encourage people like even just, you have a segment from here to here, like might say, you might just do that with me and you might come along. I use the letters STR, but you might indicate to me that that's supposed to be a straight line. And then I'll average kind of what you're giving me. Anything you can write down is good for our let's say signal to interference. The more signal you give me, the better I'm understanding.
How about just putting a series of points?
Yeah, exactly. So you're absolutely right. So here I'm at this curve. A lot of times what I do, because I'm anyway doing that in the computer, is I'll come along this curve and instead of trying to copy that curve, the tighter the radius, the more points you need. But I don't know if you guys probably can't really see what I'm doing, but I just put a point. Because anyway, in the computer, when I take those points, I'm going to take like a Bezier curve and like try to fit it best I can. So that works great too. And so we do that a lot. And sometimes people can even take points and then they can take their patterns into their garage or something and they know it's straight and they can draw a line through their own points and average them. So we can, hey, this line of points is really a line, just to make it clear for us. So that's kind of the, that's kind of the ideas. Cobble really quickly, don't be afraid to take a bunch of pieces together. You can use tape, you can use a pen, you can use points. You can write things like offset to tell us how much to offset, all kinds of stuff like that. It's a great idea to draw an arrow pointing at the bow. There's another little trick that we sometimes do, which I can't really show on here, but sometimes in my little instructions I wrote like 10 years ago, I used to have this thing where I would, I would kind of use little dots to indicate like the ends. Like I might put a dot here and a dot here, and I started implying it was straight from that dot to the dot, and then like dots. But you don't need to do that necessarily. You just need to figure out some way to quickly copy that shape off your boat. Most of the time, I follow the existing grip line. Once in a while, I'll go bigger because I want to get down on that shiny surround around some kind of gel coat texture to try to get a better bond. But if it's super duper raised like this one, sometimes a big step down isn't a good idea because the edge might try to lift up eventually. So anyway, most important is probably copying the edges of things, taking some photos, and then we can consult with you on any particular job and say, hey, good idea, bad idea, let's try this, what do you think of that?
So on that boat, you're not asking them to take that non-skid down to flush and prime it and clean it up.
I mean,
And then
in a
put them
perfect
on.
world, yes. In a perfect world, yes. But many of my clients will stick directly on top of that waffle root, right? And we will too. We have a few tricks to this is like the absolute limit of what we can handle. Water under. Right. Your mind is in the right place. But it's hard to convince people to sand. Nobody wants to sand on a boat. It's like they haven't. They know. He has spent like a million hours sanding. Normal people seem to think it's a pain. I don't know.
Nice.
Okay, so let's pretend that that's what you got. You guys have a few more minutes? Okay, so if that's gonna go on the computer, I'm just gonna switch gears here. Well, any sheet of foam is 1 by 2 meters, so that's sort of your limit. So if yeah, please take this stool, I'll let anyone who wants it. So whatever, if I'm trying to figure out what layer things are. So like when we digitize, well, it's really hard to see you guys, but let's pretend that this panel I did for the boat show some years ago, and you can see like we digitized some kind of box around there. This is the Java, here's the circle. I'm surprised it has so many points. I can't remember, I just pulled up the file from the old days. It's like all P on. So you can kind of see the only points we're actually digitizing in this case where you see those dots. I'm not sure what was happening with the circle. That's kind of not maybe the normal technique, but those are the points. So we don't work on a 3D scale. But this one is kind of wavy and stuff. And so we'll sort of like end up, drawing over that. And we'll end up just sort of making this this representation here of the panel, right? That kind of makes sense. So really, the blue lines are where we're going to run the router to mill the grooves. So the plank lines, we just make those up. I mean, we literally just make them up. So if you want narrow planks or wide planks, whatever style you want, we're just making that up. That's just artwork, right? So we draw on there and we come up with something we think looks cool. And then we fire it over here. In our case, we toolpath it up. And then we send it over to the router. That's in the center of the router.
For those of you who are joining us remotely, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll take a look for Dan. Thought it was coming back over here. Just want to be close if people are asking questions. For those of you who couldn't hear Dan, he was having a little technical difficulties, but he found the file location. He is going to cut off a piece and then show us how to adhere it. And I do see your question online. Thank you. I will ask Dan when we get a chance. Yeah. Folks online too.
They're all the same, some different thicknesses.
Yeah. Okay.
The density is like 140 kilograms per meter, but that doesn't help you because you're not buying a cube, right? So I can tell you the data, but it's very light, and that's
Heavier than it could have been, or lighter than it could have been.
it's probably a little bit heavier, but not a lot. It's pretty light.
Lighter than, no, I know.
Keep it around. You might as well just go ahead and buy another pair of rain pants right now. You're gonna wear it in the house.
So, yeah, so.
I do have a couple questions from folks joining us remotely in the chat. So, let's see, Ben would like to know, the piece in there, how thick is it?
Okay, that's a two-color foam. All our two-color Raptor Deck is 6 millimeters thick, basically a quarter inch.
And how do you bevel the edges?
Circles all in round, your bolt nose like a router bit, and when it goes around, it's creating the bevel worms. We're literally milling that. You can also, on a do-it-yourself kit, you can go to like Blick. What was it? Blick up on Capitol Hill, the art supply place, and you can buy these funny little tools that will hold it like a mat board cutter style. That'll hold a razor at a 45-degree angle. And if you're extra careful, you can kind of get a good result doing that.
Okay. So I think that answers the other question that was online was, can you buy a piece and cut it yourself?
Ship you on or come by the shop?
You're gonna make me a new panel. How do I get the old damaged one off?
You help a little bit, but it's not as helpful as you might want. It's a little bit of a wide frame. Normally, you can pretty much get an edge going and just rip them off. If they're on shiny, brand new all grip and they're really stuck down, that can be hard. And the best move is to cut them into. And one great move is like wallpaper, to cut some strips on the deck and then work them up one strip at a time. Another good idea that works pretty well, if you know what a fine saw is or an oscillating tool, the Fine brand makes two different putty knife attachments, a soft one and a thicker gauge metal one. The thicker one, you'll take divots out of your boat. The soft one, which is also great for removing like name decals, you can get under the Raptor Deck, and that you can really like, if you're having like a situation where it's really hard to get up.
Right at the sharp edge. So, yeah. Okay.
It's also kind of like cutting it a little bit with the edge of that blade. It seems to work pretty well. But for the most part, it's not like a huge drama to get them up. If you say wanted to get all the residual glue off, that is a drama. That is more challenging. But normally that's not a thing because people, I mean, we've been doing this 13 years and I've never had a single customer come back to me. It's not marketing, it's true. Not one person has come back to me and said, I want to go back to my original text. We've warranted panels, we've redone kits, we've had problems like any company. We've done a lot of, mostly obviously successful, but normally if you're going to replace panels, you pull the old ones up, you scrub any loose glue off with Dawn, dish soap, rinse off knock off any loose glue burgers, get the boat super dry, and you can stick right down over that residual old glue. From a wear standpoint, it really depends on what kind of guy you are. Like industrial crowd pod, commercial fishermen. Like the problem is nicks and scratches for the lightweight girl stuff. Yeah, for UV stability and that, I mean, we had a kit down here in Glory, the TP52 that I just replaced. That thing was, I think, 11 years old, and it still looks pretty good. So we typically tell people like, oh, 5-7 years, something like this.
Sailing shoes.
Yeah, it lasts a long time. It depends on how rough and tumble you are, because it's really like.
Good 12 years. I'm kind of guessing. Yeah.
Well, we've done replacements for sure. Like some of the racing teams, these sponsors, they want new kits. Like, yeah, I mean, so we've done plenty of.
Is it like the same as putting it on the first time, or is this sort of like 1.5 times to get the old stuff off? But what's the kind of?
We like for pricing, we look at it like it's basically like that one's like kind of job by job. See how
I'm just wondering from a.
But yeah,
It's
There's all kinds of colors. Thickness that maybe better answers your question. Well, maybe. General thickness.
That's when it costs a couple of bucks. Because speed range is really super slow. You might have noticed the powder to barrel. Actually has to go both ways on every plank, for example. The little drag knife I showed you earlier cut the vacuum paper and whatnot. Almost. So there's our little panel. Not sure if it's a great fit. It's not the pattern I just made now. We made it a while ago, so that's gonna be awesome. But we can pretend that's pretty cool, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that is.
Very cool.
So talking about the install part of this process is like, where do I start? Okay. I'm just gonna install this oven. This is not a dumpy surface. And I'm gonna talk about some before. It's sort of like I'm gonna back up, but I just wanted to get the basics out there first. So let's say you order a kit from us and you're gonna do your install, drop off some patterns. We duplicate them. First we sent you something that looks like this. We're like, hey, does this look right, Mr. Smith? Are you sure you want this color? That kind of thing. And so you'll get basically 2 scale fully colored in drawing of the parts you're buying with the set cost. There's no surprises. Like, here's the price. It's $36 a square foot if you bring us the patterns. And so we just ask the computer how many square feet that is and multiply by 36. We tell you that's the price and it's what it's going to look like. And then you say, okay, but I don't like that. And can you change the look? And can you do a border around there? And can you do this? And we'll just kind of work back and forth with you to update the look. But at some point you say, yeah, that's what my wife and I like. And let's go ahead and do it. And we say, awesome. And you sign off on the proof, basically. That triggers me on the job board to mark proof approved. And that triggers my CNC guy that he can pick up the file and push the green button. Off we go. So then this thing shows up in the mail, or you just come by and pick it up and bring me a cup of coffee or whatever. Yeah, if we mail it, it's going to be rolled up in a box, typically like this, wrapped in saran wrap and shoved in a box. Works pretty good. If that's the case and we ship you a panel, it's a good idea to lay them flat when you get them instead of letting them sit in the box rolled up for a year, because after a while they'll kind of get some memory. And they'll be a little curled up, and that can be a little bit annoying at the point of install. And the backing paper will start to creep a little bit too. But normally pretty straightforward. So if we have something like this, I typically try to use your imagination. But a lot of times I'll go, especially if it's a big complicated area, I might go on there and give myself a couple reference marks. Like I might make a little pencil mark on the boat there, or over there. So I have something that I'm kind of like, okay, I'm sort of usually looking at these small features first. And I'm kind of like, man, it's gonna look dumb if one of those circles is not right in the middle. So I'm like, okay, maybe they're not totally perfect, but I can kind of fudge it around until the white space around these tight things is good. And then I'll kind of look at the big stuff because there's a little more freedom there if you're a little off. Right? That's personal preference. And then what I do, a lot of times I also, if you have like a bunch of panels, it's not a bad idea to take some masking tape and like tape this panel down so it doesn't move. And then position those other ones and take a look at those gaps that they're even. And make some more marks. And maybe you find out, oh, I got to just rotate. I just shift this. I'll do that. And then like I have a little bit of like, oh, that one looks, you can hide some chaos if you like figure it out in advance. Make some sense work. So that's kind of how we do it. Then you get down to, like we know where it's going to go. I normally pick somewhere in the middle and I just like kind of score the paper, the razor blade. And then I'll bend the thumb to kind of get that going. And I'll fold a little bit of backing paper back. I try not to touch the glue too much because I don't want to wreck the stick, right? Kind of obvious stuff. And then actually, if that paper is folded over, it does a pretty good job of sticking. It'll kind of levitate on that. So you can kind of set it there and you can kind of go back to wherever the pencil marks were. And when you're happy, sort of looking around, and when I'm kind of like, feel like that's a happy medium, say, I'll maybe even just tap it down right there a little bit, like rotate around that spot. I'll be like, okay, maybe that's a little tighter. That's about right. I still have the chance I could rip this thing back up because I only stuck just a little bit right there. That's why you're kind of going through the technique of not like, if you rip the backing paper off, you're like, I'm gonna stick this thing on. You're so screwed, like, forget. So that's kind of technique. You're kind of like, oh, you know, and I'm not gonna mash this one super hard because I'm gonna pull it off for another demo. But I'll kind of like mash that down, right? That stripe. And now it's really pretty locked in place. And then I'll go in here. I didn't smush it down very hard, as you can see. And I'll start kind of. I was too gentle. I guess I gotta be more serious. Let's try again.
It's the camera.
I've done a couple of these before, believe me. All right, so let's say we're kind of stuck down there. I'll give it a little more love. And then I'll be a little more careful here. Keep rolling. And you really like the reason we're working out from the middle is because this won't with all these bumps and stuff. And I might look here because you can see it's a little stretchy, right? And I might kind of push and pull that to make it feel parallel to that edge or whatever before I really touch down. And you kind of want to avoid it. In fact, want to go over at the end of the channel and push hard, but this is actually a pretty good step too. Sometimes you'll see me on a boat and I'll pull the paper and kind of let it relax back. And I'll be kind of like landing it along there as I go, especially on a shiny surface. I'm not really pushing hard, but it's just like sticking a sticker to your window. Like you really are trying to avoid bubbles, right? And then maybe you get in here and you just check your circle a bit to make sure you can sort of like push and pull it around a little bit. Again, I'm not going to mash on this because I want to pull it up. But you can kind of imagine, and on this side, if you bend it back, this paper will kind of pop up. Guess I didn't match it there.
You could have pre-folded that, yeah.
I could have, but most of the time I just do the one side. But sometimes I pre-fold both sides if it's a tricky shape. And right there, you see me stretching a little bit. It's because I'm forcing those circles to be in alignment. Of course, I can't see those circles, so sometimes you're on a tricky install. You might even just kind of get the backing paper out of there so you can kind of check if you're getting off course. Because you have some ability, like I'm a little low here, so I'll start trying to pull the pad this way as I go a little bit. Or pushing there and kind of a little bit. You don't want to go too crazy because like I said, the foam has some memory, but you can kind of push and pull just a little bit to kind of like make sure, for example, that the circles land in the middle. And then once it's down, again, I'm not really going to do this because I want to pull it up. You really want to go far one. Keep foams out all the time. You get one for $25. Redstone way. And it's such a good idea to start in the middle and like really like push it down, especially on a bumpy surface like this. Pushing that foam down into those valleys to get a better bond. And after you've done all the rolling, then you want to come with your thumb, which kind of hurts, and you want to push that all down on the edge and do your best to try to like seal that around in there and really push it down to the grooves. So that's sort of the normal flow for sticking powder. Split it in the middle, make some pencil marks, tape them things down if you need to make some more pencil marks. Get it on there, working out from the middle, mash it down with the roller really, 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 really hard if you want it to stay stuck for a long, long time. Don't do the edges before you mash with the roller because you're just going to seal the edge a little bit and it's going to be harder for air to exhaust. And then at the last step, you can also get a little roller to go around the edge, but I just use my thumb or whatever and mush it down. So that's how 99% of these are stuck down at 90%. The only other thing I want to mention on that is Primer 94, which is pulled out. And so some guys were mentioning it earlier. This stuff, which you can buy at Fishery Supply and on the internet and everywhere, came out of the sign making business. It's an adhesive promoter that works with these types of acrylic pressure sensitive adhesives. It's critical. Totally have to use it if you're sticking on king starboard, polyethylene kayak, or a cooler top. We also find that it helps adhesion long term on like bumpy surfaces. It's not like it's 1,000% better, but it's like 20-15% better than not using it. It's enough better that it's worth it. If you have a deck that's like bumpy pyramids like this, we definitely encourage you to use the Primer 94 before you stick the panels. A tin like this is like $25. So it's not super cheap, but one tin will basically 1 to 2 tins does a whole boat. You don't want to pour it in a big paint tray because it flashes off almost instantly. So anytime you're not using it, put the lid on it. We run around, my guys run around, which is getting a little bit out there, but this is from our shop, obviously. And my guys run around with a setup like that for the most part. And they pour like a tin in here and they work really, really, really fast because it's like flashing off like crazy. Not a bad idea to wear a respirator. The other way to do it is just like, just got with one boat, you're just doing an area or whatever, chip brush is perfectly reasonable, or a foam brush, just make sure you get a good foam brush, because the cheap ones, it'll melt it.
Be with it. You get it past
Yeah,
there.
so it's like clear, and it looks like you're painting water, but it smells like acetone. And so if you go off the edge, you won't see it on the first day at all. But if you come back like 3 weeks later, you just barely make out a little discoloration where dust and stuff is stuck in it. So really your goal is to not paint outside the lines. But for us at Raptor Deck, we don't mask. We freehand the stuff on. We call that good enough. So, but you can make it out if you really look for it. And we splooged outside the edge, let's say.
Is there anything you could do like now to feel the edge here?
You know, there isn't really anything amazing there. It turns out like the foam grows and shrinks a lot with temperature. And so like you would think, can I Sikaflex or whatever? But at the moment, not Raptor nor our competitors come with like a really good product to go around the edge with. This may be something interesting for the future. You may have seen like a rubberized version of this that 3M sells for skateboard grip tape style stuff, called like, that's supposed to hold the edges of like sandpaper down when you put it on your stair treads at the factory or whatever. But it doesn't work well, and there really is nothing that hangs onto the foam with any kind of nasty that also hangs onto your boat, which you can also apply and not make a giant mess. So really there is no edge seal for the program. Your best edge seal is to smush your panels down with your finger and start with a sort of smooth deck to start with. That'll help a lot.
So you're talking about really no really, once it lifts, there's no way to compare to that.
That's not what I just said, but that's another good talking point. Normally, like for the most part, if something lifts up or a panel has a problem, for the most part, you know, anything we install, we warranty for a year. Actually, we warranty things much longer than that, but we pretend that we're going to warranty them for a year, and then people come to us like 4 years later and we still help them. But in truth, you know, there's a couple techniques to re-gluing panels, but usually the most cost-effective plan, if I'm totally honest, is just to make you a new panel. Because you'll go on the internet and people will be like, use Super 77. That Super won't work. Some people say use Super 90. That will actually work. You have to spray the boat and the panel, wait for it to flash off. It's a real contact adhesive and you can stick it down. The problem comes in 10 years when you want to pull the pad off and you got a bunch of yellow powdered contacts adhesive under there and your boat always has that yellow stain on it. So generally we tell people don't do that. It's also possible to give you a bit of like double-sided tape, which you can pick the edge up and slide under there, trim with a knife, peel the backing paper, and try to stick down. This is not too bad a solution if you just have like a corner or something left. But for the most part, things either are installed well and they stay stuck like completely, or they're not installed well and they don't stick well, and you just end up putting a new panel on. So just sticking a corner down isn't something that typically is the right solution. And with the way the pricing is, really, if you do a decent install, meaning you clean the boat, you use Dawn. I know, rocket science. Sometimes we don't even use Dawn. We use Windex, works absolutely fabulously if you're in a pinch. And then make sure the deck's nice and clean and you follow that procedure and you go over it with a roller. It's pretty doubtful that stuff's going to start peeling up. Unless it's a super bumpy surface. And that's where there's some trade-off there that we can't like guarantee it's going to stay stuck forever, ever. So that's kind of the lowdown on the install. And then before this is stuck like crazy, you should know that the panels get stickier and stickier for weeks actually. But if you look at the data sheet, the bond gets really quite a bit better over the first 24 hours. And then that curve levels off pretty much. I mean, it keeps getting better, but so we kind of tell you, hey, if you can, like, don't wash your boat 5 minutes after you stick the pads on.
Yeah, you're doing this.
Yeah, temperature for install is like, you guys have great questions. I mean, you guys are like, you must be multi-sellers. You guys are all, if you're multi-sellers, you're already like, what do they call the kids at school? You're already high cap. But yeah, because you know if you flip your boat, you're dead. But what was the question now? I forgot.
Temperature,
Oh yeah.
humidity.
I would say the initial tack isn't very good when it's really crispy cold out. And so like for us at the shop, 45 degrees is kind of the cutoff for our shop installs. And if it's colder than that, we try to push them back to a day that's like 47 degrees or whatever.
Dry.
But more important than temperature, the most important thing is no moisture. Like, don't try too early in the morning. Like, really, like a slightly wet surface is really terrible on the adhesive. Interestingly, you can feel like you messed up the adhesive because you got a little moisture on it. And you can kind of like prop a panel up maybe and like let it bake in the sun for a bit and evaporate all that water off, and it'll sort of be okay and reactivate. Probably saying too much here. But at the point of install, you do not want moisture. That's like a big deal. That sort of kills the tack. Well, I mean, it just depends on, I don't know exactly what the number would be, but you know, in Seattle, that's not a really big deal for us. If it's not raining and the deck's dry, we're good to go for the most part. And we stick kits all the way through the winter. However, if it's like crispy cold, like it was frosty that morning and it's still in the high 30s, that's probably not a good day to do it.
A broke alcohol, wipe down something, anything get the last bit of water out?
Yeah, I mean I think that would be that alcohol obviously helps get rid of water, so that could be a good move if you're really trying to push it. But for the most part, in our case, I mean we run around with denatured alcohol and stuff to get Sharpie markers off and whatnot, and we'll use that once in a while. But for the most part, we just clean the decks with soap and water, and we dry them off with a towel, and we wait a little bit for them to evaporate, and we're good.
My 2-year-old Raptor Deck.
That's a great question too.
Somebody spilled barbecue sauce.
Yeah, so the fact is, I mean, obviously it's a giant sales pitch, but the fact that it's closed cell, it's really stain resistant, and it's working really well for a lot of fishermen, including my silent partner who goes tuna fishing all the time. And his boat's like a giant bloodbath of tuna blood, and it still cleans up. For cleaning, our go-to has always been Dawn. If you read Consumer Reports, it's kind of like the best generic, soapy detergent stuff. However, in recent years, we discovered OxyClean powder is super, super great for cleaning Raptor Deck. So that's another thing you can try. We had a little anecdotal story that I probably told to some of you already because I like it so much. But we got a call, if you know where they stack all the ski boats over there on the lake, a ski boat on top of the rack had an inboard outdrive or something that leaked oil down on like a bunch of boats underneath that had product on there. And they called us up and they said, oh my God, how much is it to replace all the Raptor decks for these 5 boats in the stack? Because we need to make our insurance claim or whatever, figure this thing out. So we kind of got involved. But that actually kind of triggered us at the time because we had been we didn't really know. Honestly, we've been doing it for 13 years and we didn't really know what to tell them for what's the best cleaning. So we got cleaners from 3M and local brands, and we went to the auto parts store and got engine, like whatever, engine degreasers, and we got all kinds of stuff. And then we started running some tests here at the shop. Just like we had some oil out of my old Suburban and we threw that on a bunch of panels, and then we let it sit out there in the back for a few days. And then we were like, okay, or a couple weeks actually. And then we were like, okay, let's try to clean this stuff off. And OxyClean was absolutely the best out of all the stuff we tried. And what we found the best technique was, for future reference, is if you got the deck wet and then you sprinkle some OxyClean on there, it kind of made a slurry almost, so not a ton of water, scrub with a stiff nylon brush and let it soak for a while and then rinse it off. That seemed to really do well on, for example, diesel stain. So that's something you can try. So also a soft scrub with bleach. We have guys using that. One thing that we think not to avoid is salt away. I don't know if you know that product that people, particularly powerboaters, seem to love that stuff. We find that we don't have any scientific, real hard, like proper tests, but my hunch is, I have a feeling, a strong hunch that salt away is bad for the acrylic pressure sensitive adhesive for some reason. So we've had a few motorboat kits that failed, surprisingly, that didn't seem like they should. And in several of those cases, it was, we were like, was your boat ceramic coated before we got here? Like, what's going on? Was it fresh out of the mold? Like, whatever. And the sort of common thread right now is they were using salt away really frequently. So I don't know that to be a fact, but we have a somewhat a hunch about that. Anyway, that's a tangent. Thank you guys for so much, and please come back and see us if you ever have a little project. We're so down, we'll do like a single step this big for you. That's kind of how it works. Super stoked you came by. If you didn't grab a beer, feel free to hang out, grab a beer. I'll be here for, I don't know, another half an hour, 40 minutes, and then I'll probably run for the ferry to get home. I live on Bainbridge.
What are you doing?